Thanks for being here today for this important conversation. At the top, I just want to recognize United States Representative Melanie Stansbury of New Mexico for being here as well. We should be doing more of this, where we take that short walk across the United States Capitol or across the campus to be part of important conversations and make sure the American people have the truth and the facts. So, Representative, thank you for your leadership and thank you for taking time to be here. Now, as we all know, SNAP faces the greatest threat we have seen in the entirety of its program. Full stop. We've never seen anything like this. House Republicans were tasked with cutting $230 billion in nutrition assistance programs to the Americans who need it most. $230 billion is what they were told to go after. Well, that wasn't enough. The final budget package that passed out of the House of Representatives at the end of May slashes $300 billion in funding for nutrition assistance. This would devastate availability of food to the most vulnerable, to working families across the country, children, parents, seniors, veterans. There's just no question. And every one of us across the country, in the Senate, in the House, Democrats, Republicans, it doesn't matter what party someone may be affiliated with, all of our constituents are going to be hurt. And by the way, just because someone is not a direct beneficiary of these programs, they're going to feel the pain and be hurt as well. And we're going to hear why every community across the country is going to feel this, and especially rural parts of America. What I hope this forum will illustrate is that this significant cut, $300 billion in slashing this program, is not just an abstract number printed on a piece of paper in Washington, D.C., but that we can help explain and connect with people across the country to show that these are dollars that go directly to families in every corner of America. And each one of these families will be impacted by these cuts. They're not strangers. These aren't folks out there that are set out on scamming some program or another. These are people that we go to church with. They're our friends, they're our neighbors. They might be your children's classmates. They might be your children's teammates on whatever team they may be a part of. These are folks that we know. For some of us, it may be a sibling, our nieces and nephews, our kids. There needs to be more sunlight shed on what's happening, not just here in Washington, D.C., but with its impact across the country. Now, for the past 50 years, we have maintained a promise to the American people. Regardless of which party is in power, no matter how hard times get or where you live, we will not let fellow Americans descend so far into poverty in the United States that there's no program to prevent them from starving. Passage of the House budget bill would be a shocking reversal of this long-standing promise, ripping a gaping hole in the nutritional floor in the United States of America that we have fought so long for, from the original conversation about building a farm bill in the United States of America, understanding that we need to have strong food programs, support farmers and ranchers, and by the way, destroying these nutrition programs in America also devastates farmers and ranchers that are working to get local food into schools and food banks across the country. Now, cuts to SNAP will impact every level of our nation's food supply. It will harm the farmers who grow the food being purchased with SNAP dollars, the food banks and churches across the country working day and night to fight hunger in our communities, and the grocery and convenience stores in rural communities that already operate on razor-thin margins. As a matter of fact, this cut alone could jeopardize many grocery stores in the most rural, small parts of America where they might just close. That's how it's going to impact folks that are not direct beneficiaries of this program. Because that grocery store that you can drive to and in a rural part of America, I mean, heck, a 20-mile drive is a short drive. That's going to add 2 or 3 hours to that commute in one direction if you're able to find a grocery store. So look, at a time of economic uncertainty, our farmers deserve better too. They deserve the certainty of a 5-year bipartisan farm bill, not a partisan process that cuts dollars from ag programs to pay for tax cuts for our nation's wealthiest. In a country as wealthy as the United States of America, allowing hunger to persist is a policy choice. That's what this vote means. I want to live in a country where no child goes to bed with an empty belly, where veterans who have put their lives on the line to protect our rights don't have to worry about whether their next meal will come from some strange place or if they can even find it when they come home from war. Or our seniors. We want them to retire with dignity and maybe even have an extra special snack in the cupboards rather than an empty stomach when they go to bed. Maybe something in the cupboards for when the grandkids come over. That's what we're talking about here. We disagree on many things here in Congress, but I hope my Republican colleagues can agree that this is a program and the communities that it serves are worth fighting for. I think that sums it up. So everyone, thank you for joining today. All of our panelists will introduce here momentarily. I look forward to our discussion today. And with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to a friend of all of ours, a colleague in the United States Senate, and that's the ranking member of the Senate Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry, Senator Amy Klobuchar.
Well, thank you so much, Senator Luján. Thank you, Chairman, for your leadership of this really important subcommittee in our day jobs, but right now for holding this forum. And I gotta say that it's on all of us and on our witnesses and advocates to get this information out here of what's going on today. The SNAP program is the cornerstone of our anti-hunger infrastructure in America, and it is under attack like it has never been under attack before. The President and Senate Republicans actually promised to lower grocery costs, and instead what's happened, well, first we have about a $3,000 Trump tariff tax on every family in America. They are now doubling down on this by raising grocery costs for more than 4 million Americans who rely on SNAP. The House bill would cut up to $300 billion in food assistance, whether they're doing it by shifting costs onto state. And I really think that this sleight of hand has to be broadcast to the world because they're claiming they're making this cut when over half of this is shifting things over to the states at exorbitant amounts. Kansas alone, 50 million. North Carolina, over 400 million. And yet 41 of these states have balanced budget amendments. So when they're saying, hey, we're not making cuts, we're putting it over on the states, they're actually, the money isn't there, to quote Laura Kelly, who is the moderate governor, Democratic governor in Kansas, who heads up the Democratic Governors Association. Or to paraphrase what Josh Call has said, Josh Stein has said in the state of New Hampshire, or what of North Carolina, or what we heard from Andy Beshear in Kentucky, that these are things where they're going to have to choose between feeding people or providing health care or making sure that they have police and fire paid for. So these are things that are really going on right now, and people have to see that on a local basis, state by state. I have gone through my state and visited food banks, of course, but also grocery stores. And that's another piece of this puzzle that we need to amplify and people need to understand. Independent grocers are standing up big time. They realize they're the only store in town in so many places, not just in town, but for the entire region around it. And they have their SNAP recipients can range from 5% of their customers to 40% of their customers. And so this is also a jobs issue, but it's also a way of the ecosystem, especially of rural America, where this grocery store may be the only thing that they've got left. And so this is more than just the hunger. That's our number one focus for very good reasons. Hunger involving kids, involving families, involving veterans, involving seniors. But it's also about a shift to state that is a bit of it's a joke for them to claim it's cuts when they're putting it over on states, red states, blue states, purple states. So I'm grateful to the witnesses that are here. I thank Senator Luján for his tremendous leadership in putting this hearing together and look forward to hearing from all of you. Thanks.
Senator Klobuchar, thank you so very much. I want to introduce the panel of our expert witnesses. Dr. Diane Whitmore Schazenbach currently serves as the Margaret Walker Alexander Professor in the School of Education and Social Policy at Northwestern University, an economist who studies policies aimed at improving the lives of children, something we should all be doing more and more. Dr. Barbara Gwynn currently serves as Commissioner of the New York State Office of Temporary Disability Assistance, a position she was confirmed to by the New York State Senate in May of 2024. She serves as a member of Governor Hochul's cabinet. Ms. Katie Anderson is joining us from my home state of New Mexico, where she's the Vice President of Strategy, Partnerships, and Advocacy at the Roadrunner Food Bank of New Mexico. She's dedicated her life and her career to addressing hunger in New Mexico and has been with Roadrunner Food Bank since 2014. And Ms. Jay Johnson, joining us from Germantown, Maryland. Ms. Johnson is the mother of a 6-year-old and is currently a child care worker, home health aide, and a student pursuing a certification as a dialysis technician. Thank you all for being here. Dr. Schazenbach, you are now recognized for your statement.
Thank you. Senator Luján, Senator Klobuchar, members of the committee, thank you so much for inviting me today to testify before you on SNAP. You said I'm Diane Schazenbach. I'm an economist at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. For more than 2 decades, I have conducted and published many, many research articles on SNAP. Is the microphone okay, or does it need to be moved? It's okay? Okay. My testimony is going to cover 3 broad points. First, SNAP provides important help to a very wide range of Americans who struggle to put food on the table. The provisions in the recently passed House bill would cause substantial harm to children, to older Americans, and to low-wage workers. Now, second, a strength of SNAP across its more than 50-year history has been that federal funding of benefits allows the program to quickly scale up in times of increased economic need that stems not only from national recessions, but can also be more local or regional in nature, such as due to plant closures or natural disasters, et cetera. This new requirement for states to pay for up to 25% of SNAP benefits would substantially reduce its effectiveness in times of economic downturns. Now, third, substantial expansions of work requirements to include parents and people in their 60s will not increase employment among these groups, but will take away food benefits from many people who are unemployed, can't find work, or face other substantial barriers to employment. The House bill combines expanded work requirements with new rules that also make it much harder for states to waive work requirements when labor market conditions are poor. SNAP is highly efficient and effective as a program. It supplements a family's cash resources so that between SNAP and the other income, they can afford to buy a sufficient diet. Average benefits are just over $6 per person per day. SNAP provides many benefits both to individuals and to society. For individuals, it lifts people out of poverty, it reduces food insecurity and hunger, and it benefits children in the short run and over the long term. But it also benefits the wider economy by providing an effective economic stimulus. It serves as an automatic stabilizer in difficult economic times. By design, SNAP can very quickly adapt when we have an economic downturn. As more households become eligible for the program, for example, due to job loss, they can be quickly enrolled with program outlays automatically expanding along with need, and then reducing again as the economy recovers. SNAP funds then are spent very rapidly, helping the economy in people's local communities, including boosting the retail sector, the wholesale sector, and the transportation systems that deliver those groceries that are purchased. According to the Congressional Budget Office, SNAP is one of the programs that provides most of the automatic stabilization from federal spending. The SNAP policies in the House-passed reconciliation bill would weaken SNAP's role as an automatic stabilizer. Across SNAP's 5-decade history, benefits have always been paid by the federal government alone. The House bill changes this long-standing aspect of the program, mandating that states pay between 5 and 25% of SNAP benefits. This is a problem because it would impede SNAP's ability to quickly respond to increased need. It's well known that during recessions, states face real budget crises. Since almost all states are required to balance their budget, they then face pressures to cut spending on other programs, such as education. If you moved a portion of SNAP benefits into this, it would just exacerbate that existing problem and in turn reduce SNAP's countercyclical responsiveness and increase the severity of economic downturns for all of us. Now, furthermore, while improving employment and job opportunities is it's a goal that we all share, rigorous evidence clearly shows that increasing SNAP work requirements has no positive impact on work outcomes. On the other hand, they're very effective at reducing the likelihood that someone gets relief from SNAP. The House bill expands the categories of participants who are subject to the work requirement, adding AVODs up to age 64, and also parents whose youngest child is older than age 6. What's more, those states have historically been able to request waivers from work requirements under a range of criteria that indicate that an area has a cyclically weak labor market. The House bill radically limits the conditions under which states can request these waivers. The provision will penalize the unemployed when they can't find jobs. It will curtail SNAP's countercyclicality, both making it too slow to expand and too quick to retract as the economy recovers slowly. SNAP's effective, and this House bill makes it less effective.
Thank you, Dr. Schausenbach, for your testimony today. Ms. Gwynn, the floor is yours. I also want to welcome Senator Smith to the dais as well. Ms. Gwynn?
Okay, good afternoon, Senator Luján, Senator Klobuchar, and other members of the committee. My name is Barbara Gwynn. I am the Commissioner of the New York State Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance. Our agency oversees a range of programs that financially assist lower-income households. Thank you for the opportunity to testify here today. I am here to speak on the critical value of the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, and share how the cuts put forward by the recently passed House Reconciliation Bill would harm individuals and states nationwide by forcing billions of dollars in annual cost shifts, alongside unprecedented administrative hurdles that will harm households that rely on SNAP. SNAP is the largest and most effective hunger prevention program in the country, supporting over 40 million individuals each day. In New York, SNAP helps 2.9 million individuals, most of whom are children, older adults, or disabled, to put food on the table. SNAP has long been a successful federal and state partnership that has benefited from the support of presidents from both parties, as well as broad bipartisan support from Congress. The federal government has always fully funded SNAP benefits, helping people meet their basic nutritional needs, reducing poverty, and improving the well-being of citizens and communities throughout this country. In addition to supporting individuals and alleviating hunger, SNAP also provides vital support to the nation's economy. A total of $7.4 billion in SNAP benefits are issued annually in New York. The USDA's own research has shown that there is a multiplier effect with SNAP benefits. It is estimated that every $1 in SNAP benefits generates over $1.5 in economic activity as recipients spend their benefits in local communities, including grocery stores, farmers markets, and small businesses. The proposals in the House-passed reconciliation bill are being promoted as actions to reduce waste, fraud, and abuse. As the commissioner of a state agency that oversees this program, I can tell you that is absolutely false. Instead, these proposals threaten an effective and efficient program which research consistently and clearly shows has very low rates of recipient fraud, reduces hunger, supports work, and stimulates the economy. Goals with national importance that justify continued federal investments. States are eager to strengthen this program. That is why we consistently invest resources to monitor payment error rates, identify root causes, and take corrective action. The House-passed bill would actually weaken the program through cuts and cost shifts. Hunger would increase for millions. Cuts and policies. States cannot. These are costs that simply cannot be absorbed. All in all, the SNAP-related cost shifts put forward in this bill will cost New York State over $2.1 billion each year. The attempt to justify these cost shifts from the federal government to state and local governments based on recent and atypical program error rates is a false and unwarranted narrative. Instead, these program proposals simply shift federal cost down to state and local governments with absolutely no benefit to the American people. Also of utmost importance, the policy changes in the House bill will place millions of individuals at risk of hunger. In closing, let me say that if enacted, these cuts would make it harder for low-income families to afford groceries, worsening food insecurity and hardship. Slashing low-income households' grocery budgets would also reduce revenue for thousands of businesses with ripple effects throughout the food supply chain. Simply put, SNAP works. It is targeted, effective, and responsive. Weakening it will harm millions of Americans and increase food insecurity. I urge that each member of the Senate does not diminish, but instead strengthens the SNAP program. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify before you today. I look forward to addressing any questions you may have.
Commissioner, thank you so much for being with us today. Ms. Anderson, you're recognized.
Senator Luján and Senator Klobuchar, members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to participate in today's hearing, and thank you for your attention to a topic that impacts over 41 million people nationally and 450,000 individuals in my beloved state, New Mexico. Working to provide food support to people experiencing hunger has been a significant part of my life at Roadrunner Food Bank. My name is Katie Anderson. I'm the Vice President of Strategy, Partnerships, and Advocacy. Also here is my dedicated peer, Jason Riggs, who has spent over 16 years of his life connecting individuals and families to public benefits, especially SNAP. SNAP, previously known as the Food Stamp Program, continues to be our country's most important and effective anti-hunger program. It plays an important role in New Mexico, with 21% of the state's residents relying on the program in order to ensure access to food. More than 61% of participants are in families with children. 31% are in families with members who are older adults or are disabled, and 43% are in working families. The vast majority of SNAP recipients in New Mexico and nationally are children and seniors. Myths about SNAP persist. One is that people get on SNAP and never get off. In New Mexico, the average SNAP participant is on the program for 15 and a half months. Another myth is that people on SNAP don't work, and that is why work requirements are so important. Most people on SNAP do work. Studies have shown there is little evidence that work requirements increase employment for SNAP recipients. Increased work requirements intensify the administrative burden for state SNAP agencies, creating more paperwork and additional hoops for participants to jump through in order to get an average of $6 a day in SNAP allotments. The other major proposal in the current package consists of shifting a percentage of SNAP costs to the states. Most states are not fiscally prepared to take on this cost shift. Under the current proposal, the total additional annual cost to New Mexico's budget would be around $268 million, which is equivalent to 95 million meals. New Mexico food banks and our network of over 500 on-the-ground, committed, hard-working partner organizations, including nearly 200 churches, from larger population centers to the smallest of communities, cannot fill that hole. It would mean more than tripling our current food distribution output simply to ensure comparable access to what is available today. And New Mexico is not alone in this. Every single food bank in every single state across our country is facing the same reality. The food bank network, including tens of thousands of church partners, cannot suddenly double or triple capacity. Where would the food come from, particularly with the recent added loss of TFAP commodity food and plans to dismantle the CSFP Senior Food Box Program? The hundreds of thousands of volunteers nationally, many retired and in their 70s and 80s, cannot suddenly double or triple their effort to respond to the ballooning need. And make no mistake, drastic cuts and changes to SNAP will cause hunger to grow at an exponential rate. I am proud to be a New Mexican. Our state has made incredible strides forward in addressing food insecurity in the past few years with impactful legislation like universal healthy school meals and vital investments into food systems, including food banks and pantries. This is due to a coalition of dedicated organizations and advocates who have emphatically stated that hunger is a policy choice. Our governor and legislators from both sides of the aisle have proven that feeding people is not a partisan issue. Centering our hungry neighbors and increasing access to SNAP can and should have broad bipartisan support. I could share data with you all day, but the reality is that nothing is more impactful than the stories of those who rely on SNAP. Hello, I'm the mother of an 11-year-old boy and grandmother to 3 granddaughters, 14, 12, and 8 years old. They are children of an older child. In 2013, I fell on hard times. My job was minimum wage, and I had 3 extra mouths to feed. The dreadful feeling of not being able to care for and feed my family was overwhelming. I grew up with my mom and dad. My dad was from Chihuahua, Mexico, and a very proud hard worker, and we had everything we needed, never any help from the government. So I was proud too, and embarrassed to ask for food stamps. I applied for SNAP benefits and was approved. It was great. It felt so good to be able to go to the store and get baby formula, which I desperately needed. Food would have to wait, as I had no gas in my home. I had been cut off for non-payment. Food stamps changed my life. These benefits became my safety net. For years, food stamps supported us through thick and thin. SNAP gave us stability. Today, I earn just enough to no longer qualify, and that is a milestone I am proud of. It's also terrifying. The kids are bigger and eat more, and every dollar counts. I ask you, I beg you not to take away this much-needed assistance from families who depend on this help to survive. Sometimes it is a second chance and a light in a very dark time. I ask you from the bottom of my heart to please protect and strengthen SNAP. I've lived what it means, and I will never forget what it gave us. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I would be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Ms. Anderson, thank you so much for that. I want to welcome Senator Blunt Rochester with us today as well. Ms. Johnson, the floor is yours. Ms. Johnson?
Hello. Cool.
Hello.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Jade Johnson. I am 24 years old. I am the mother of a 6-year-old. I live in Germantown, Maryland. I work 2 jobs. One on Sundays at Darnestown Presbyterian Church in Darnestown, Maryland. My other job, I work as a certified medical assistant as a home health aide. That job is not the most consistent because, because when my client is out of town or in and out of the hospital, I am not always able to find regular hours. I work 3 hours on Sundays. During the week, I work 25 to 36 hours. On my weekends, I don't usually worry about childcare. During the week, my mother, who is also here, she helps me with a lot of my childcare, but she also deals with her own health issues that may interfere with her being there for me on a regular basis. I'm also a part-time student attending classes most evenings from 6 to 9 at Montgomery College in Rockville, Maryland. I'm studying to become a dialysis technician. With my current schedule, my daughter goes to public school, but when she's with my mom, depending on how her health is doing, her physical limitations that can prevent her from being able to help on a regular, sustained basis, can actually be in the way of me having consistent hours, along with just my older clients having their own lives and their own health issues. I usually work from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., and after that, I pick my daughter up. Me and my mom usually swap out between that if I'm not at work or at school. With summer break, I'm able to keep my daughter in school from July 12th till August 18th. So during summer break, I have to rearrange my schedule so that she's able to have care. I receive about $500 in SNAP benefits for a household of 2. That helps me with my monthly food costs, and my income from both jobs go towards paying bills. I take public transportation, and I pay people for rides. I pay rent, utilities, internet, and phones, which all total into more than about $2,600 a month. So if Congress doesn't allow me to claim my SNAP, we'll go down. Those SNAP benefits are the only way we can regularly afford to put food on the table. I would never necessarily have time to work a 3rd job to make up for the loss of my SNAP benefits and care for my child effectively. With costs going up on things like rent and other basic necessities, my income gets completely eaten up before I'm able to even think about buying food. Rising food prices make it even harder to stretch my food budget, but SNAP allows me to buy fresh produce, meats, dairies. It's sometimes super expensive, like eggs. Sometimes me and my daughter just go without, but I rely on food pantries when I need extra help stretching my food dollars, but I can't always count on that. Any cuts to my SNAP benefits would make it even harder for me to provide for my daughter and me. If my SNAP benefits were cut, I wouldn't be able to get ahead or even maintain what I have maintained and pulled together so far. It would keep me stuck in a cycle where I'm always scrambling to make ends meet and never able to focus on building a better future. SNAP is one of the only things keeping me from falling behind. It helps me maintain some stability, and if I don't have that security, I wouldn't be able to focus on school or pursue the future I'm fighting for. Thank you, guys.
Ms. Johnson, thank you for speaking up for millions of families across the country. Thank you so much for being here as well. I want to welcome Senator Welch for joining us and recognize him for his questions if he's ready.
Yeah, first of all, thank you all. I mean, I just want to say something that's, when you think about it, pretty weird. We're actually having legislation before us that would cut the $6.25 a day that people get for SNAP benefits. And of course, we got to pile on by taking away Medicaid. And that's all to pay for tax cuts. And in Vermont, and I'm sure this is true for my colleagues, I do not have people coming up to me saying, Peter, what are you doing to get my tax cut? They're wondering about the SNAP benefits and meals for their family. They're worried about health care. So it's a bad place we're in, and I'm glad that all of you are here helping us to push back on this. I do want to follow up a little bit with you, Ms. Johnson. I'm really impressed with, I don't know how you keep it together. I really don't. It's hard work doing what you do. And you've got to, and then now we add this insecurity that'll make it impossible. But you've told us a little bit about how SNAP, if it's cut, would really affect you. And is there any way you can deal with it? I mean, you are already working 2 jobs, basically. You're caring for a child, you get help of your mom, right?
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, what happens if you lose SNAP benefits?
Honestly, it would be very difficult for me to try to maintain or to continue to build as a single parent, also as a student, trying to gain stability and actually build the life that I'm trying to create, as well as I do help my mom who has reoccurring kidney issues. She has seizure disorders. So I would also have to start investing more into childcare when she is my reliable source for childcare, as well as, be able to balance
Right.
working an extra job, which would be 3 jobs, and being a student. And rather, I'm blessed enough to be
Yeah.
able to go to school at night during the summertime. So, but during the year, I've been going in the morning. So it's like drop my daughter off, then I go to school, then I go to work, then I
Right.
come home.
Well,
So it's a.
Oh, we'll fight to keep those benefits.
I
But
hope
thank you
so.
for you fighting for yourself and for your family.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me, Dr. Schanzenbeck, did I say that right? There's another aspect to this. There's what happens to a person who's depending on it, but then there's what happens to the community. And this is true for Medicaid cuts as well as for SNAP benefits. But, in Vermont, we had a discussion with all of our food shelf providers and folks at farmers' gardens. All those infrastructures have been built up with care over years. If that money gets taken away, then those organizations can't stay in business. And it's not as though a year from now, if things change, we just flip the switch and everything's back in place. So I want you to just talk about the wider impacts on the community in these institutions that play such a role in helping feed the citizens in that community.
You've got it exactly right. It will harm the availability of grocery stores because there's good evidence that having SNAP in an area helps stabilize, that sector. Furthermore, it will harm people's health, which will have spillovers to the medical community. There's evidence that it helps children's education, so it's even going to hurt test scores. There's so many aspects that SNAP touches, and I feel like that's been underappreciated in this conversation, about this bill more generally.
Right. Yeah, and so what happens to the economy in those communities? I mean, some of the food deserts that that plague us in so many spots. Those
Right, we're going to
grocery
have
stores-
more,
Yeah.
more closures of grocery stores, potentially higher prices, and those people are going to lose their jobs. So not only will people have to go further to get their food, but then there are going to be more people who don't have jobs. And so it becomes sort of an opposite multiplier effect. It's going to be a draining effect.
Right, and that'll be true throughout the country, really.
That's right. And it's going to have more concentrated impacts in certain areas that maybe have been hit, let's say, by a natural disaster or plant closures or just historically sort of disinvestment. It's really bad.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Welch. I'm going to excuse myself to run to the Senate floor for a vote. I'm going to recognize Senator Blunt Rochester for questions and to take the helm of the meeting until I return.
Thank you
Senator
so
Blunt
much,
Rochester.
Senator. And this proud freshman gladly accepts the mantle. I want to thank the ranking members for this important spotlight forum. And thank you to the witnesses for your testimony. I want to start off by addressing Ms. Johnson, just to say thank you for not only your bravery to share your story, but for the millions of people that you are speaking for that aren't in this room. I just wanted to sit with that for a minute, because one of my questions to you is that we know that 40 million Americans rely on SNAP every day. I can tell you personally, my family, growing up in Philadelphia when I was a little girl, I'm from Delaware now, I lived there most of my life, but we relied on food stamps for a time. And now I look at that time that my dad, who was the first to graduate from high school in his family, first to graduate from college, held a job, became a public servant, and now, because of the benefit of something like food stamps, raised 3 daughters. One is a professor, one is an engineer, and I'm a United States Senator. And so I want to thank you for what you're representing here. And I want people to know that the face of SNAP is all of us. It's all of us. I wanted to ask you, do you think, because part of the spotlight hearings that we're holding are to shine a light on what this Republican big bad bill or big bad betrayal bill, whatever letters you want to put out there, do you think that people know about this, that this is happening here in Washington, D.C.? That's the first question.
I don't think a lot of people know that.
Is the mic on?
Is it on? I can talk a little louder.
Yes.
I don't think a lot of people know that the benefit is at a point where it could be taken away. Because I was enlightened probably a couple of months ago, and then I noticed it started coming up a little bit more. Because I'm a mom, so I do watch the news, but I'm also a young adult, and my friends don't watch the news. So just being mindful that it's something that I do rely on. A lot of my friends, as young adults, we don't have food stamps. Because I'm a parent, I do, and because I'm working and I'm a student, I do. I'm just glad that some people started bringing some type of awareness to me, because I just got my SNAP benefits. I probably only have had SNAP for like a year after struggling for a couple of years to get it, so.
Right. To the whole panel, are there ideas and suggestions you have for us, in addition to a spotlight hearing like this, that will really amplify and get the word out? And I would ask the whole panel.
I wanted to start by speaking to her situation. Two things. These work requirements that they're trying to enforce across more people would also likely kick her off of the program. We've heard what a hard worker she is, but she talked about her hours go up and down across months. So God forbid that she has 3 months in a row where she's averaging under 20 hours a week. Or worse, that she's too busy juggling everything to check in with them every month to certify. To say that she's not a hard worker, is just absurd.
And that's one of the myths, that people aren't working. And then what you do is you put restrictions on that make it harder for people to actually continue to qualify, and then they get kicked off.
Yes.
I was in the House during the Farm Bill. I was on the Ag Committee. And so I understand that's one of the ways, instead of, you add red tape.
Yes.
Instead of taking away red tape, which is what my colleagues say they're trying to do, you add red tape for people. And so then ultimately they get kicked off, and it's a time tax, it's called, as well. I want to, and I'll get to each of you, but I know now we have some other members that have joined. For the over 40 million people who rely on it, we know that this has real implications. And I wanted to ask, under this proposal, any state with an error rate above 6% would be financially responsible for the cost of overpayments, including costs associated with administrative backlogs, technology challenges, or insufficient federal support. And this new standard would push an additional cost onto 43 states, again, impacting millions of small businesses, farmers, Americans. Commissioner Gwynn, can you discuss how SNAP error rates are measured and whether this measurement considers any systemic challenges like staffing shortages or outdated technology?
Yeah, I'd be very happy to do so. Thank you for asking the question. First and foremost, I think it's important to say that payment error rates do not measure fraud. The SNAP program, as determined by many external sources, has an extremely low rate of recipient fraud. So it is not wrought with fraud, waste, or abuse. The payment error rates measure the extent to which workers who are issuing benefits make mistakes, or perhaps recipients report information late. So it captures both overpayments and underpayments. States are already required to recoup overpayments. And the SNAP program already has a very rigorous quality control program as part of it that also includes major fiscal penalties for states that have successive years of high error rates. So in New York, I can certainly speak to the fact that historically, we have had relatively low error rates. We have typically often been below the national average. Right now, we are above the national average, but it is not due to lack of attention and diligence. As you said, it is largely due to post-COVID factors. So during COVID and after COVID, caseloads went through the roof. At the same time, counties and states were facing extreme workforce shortages, just like other businesses throughout this country. And so the combination of the two, along with our number one goal of getting benefits out timely, has contributed to what is an unusual, anomaly high error rate for New York and many other states.
Thank you for that answer. I have some additional questions that we'll submit to you afterwards, because I know I want to make sure I yield to the senator from the great state of New Jersey, Senator Cory Booker.
Thank you so much, Acting Chairwoman. I'm appreciative to you always. Your story, frankly, is emblematic of so many American stories. I don't think I had my staff pull this data for me, because I wasn't even aware of the reality for so many Americans and how short of a stay people actually have on SNAP programs. SNAP helps families temporarily get through tough times. Participants between 08 and 12, 26% left the program within 4 months, 52% left the program within 12 months, and 2/3 left the program within 24 months. This is often a bridge for families in the toughest times. And that's what we should be about. Really, we in America should be about making sure that when there is food insecurity and people who are working harder and harder, but often find themselves stuck, that we are there for each other, especially for our elders and our children, the groups that we claim to love the most as a nation, our senior citizens and our kids. And kids who are denied food security, it can have long-term effects on their well-being. It can actually raise their health costs for Americans and put them in crisis. And that's why this bill is, to me, not only emblematic of the Trump administration's hypocrisy and saying what they're going to do and then doing something completely the opposite. This is raising costs on American families, it's raising energy costs on American families, it's raising food costs on American families, raising prescription drug costs on American families. It's doing all of these things, but the cruelty of this bill to cut 30% of these programs in order to give tax cuts to the wealthiest Americans, robbing from all of us, because as you so profoundly demonstrated with what your children are doing, by undermining the strength and potential of the genius of all of our children, by shoving them into food insecurity, you are robbing from
I think it would be a little devastating for me. It would make it a little harder for me to reach my goals and to be a positive role model to my daughter and to provide. And I think it would force me to work harder without being able to do what I want to actually do. And I'm in the process of working to get to where I want to be, so it would completely interrupt my flow, if that makes sense.
it makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Because in my community, which I live in Newark, I see so many folks who are working 2 and 3 jobs, trying to keep their kids with a roof over their head, trying to make it all fit together. And this is a very small amount of money. But yet, when you are pulling SNAP away from millions of Americans, which is really Christianity does not stand for robbing from the poor in order to give the richest people on the planet Earth more money.
Yes. And I also have to make enough to even continue to receive SNAP. So just because I work 2 jobs doesn't mean that I receive SNAP. It took me a minute to be able to make enough for them to say, okay, we will actually help you, despite I'm going to school and all of that. It's a
Because it's
hustle.
not like you just go online and click a button and suddenly you get
Yes.
$3 or $4 plus per meal. You gotta go through a lot of hurdles and qualifications as
Yes.
well.
Yes, it is a hustle.
It is a hustle.
Right.
Every day
Yes.
is a hustle. I want you to know, in your stead, the acting chairwoman stood up tall and represented well.
Thank you very much, Senator Booker, always for your insight and for your leadership, Senator Blunt-Rochester. Thank you so very much. Next, we're going to hear from Senator Kane. Senator Kane?
Sure. Thank you so much for the question. Definitely, you've hit on an important point that the more barriers that are put up to accessing SNAP, which is often one of the first programs people reach out to because it serves such an essential need, right? We all need to eat. But once someone is eligible for SNAP, that often makes it, not only does it help often inform them about other programs for folks who are working in the field and trying to make sure that people can access benefits that they're eligible for, but it significantly streamlines their ability to access those programs because if they're in receipt of SNAP, they are determined to be income eligible for many other programs, often Medicaid, Home Energy Assistance Program, importantly, the WIC program, which is an important program for nutrition for new mothers and infants. So those would be some of the primary programs that SNAP eligibility helps ease an individual's access to those programs and also reduces the workload at the state and local level to administer benefits.
Can I underscore that? You know, her team very carefully documents people's incomes. And so then we can build on that to make people automatically eligible for other programs. And I would add to that Head Start and school meals under the community eligibility provision. You might remember in the old days, we used to have to bring the paperwork to school and like the lunch lady would figure it out. We don't do that anymore. We rely on her office and we've gained such efficiencies. I don't know why we would want to undo that.
You raise a good point, the food bank. By some of these other programs.
Yes.
So, I'd love to hear what you might share.
So, what got me really onto my SNAP benefits, shout out to Manna, because they really helped me fill out my applications for that. So, thank y'all for filling out all them paperworks for us, because I don't always know what I'm doing as a first-time mom. WIC, I've used WIC, Head Start, I mean, like, those things, my daughter gets free lunch, even though she's very picky, so I use my little SNAP benefits to make lunch every day, but I mean, when she's ready, she got free lunch, so that would interfere a lot.
Well, that's important for us to remember that.
Thank you so much, Senator King. Senator Schiff, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to you and Senator Klobuchar for holding this important hearing. And thank you to our witnesses for your willingness to testify on such an important issue. The big, beautiful bill, the big, beautiful betrayal is projected to take food assistance away entirely from millions of people each month, including veterans, older adults, and parents of school-aged children, not to mention 500,000 children would see cuts to food programs they depend on, like free school meals. Over time, the bill would cut food assistance benefits for all 40 million participants, including 1 out of 5 children. These estimates are jaw-dropping and, frankly, shameful. But I think what ultimately drives home how devastating these cuts will be is hearing directly from those who will be impacted. So I've been hearing from my constituents. One of those people is a constituent named Maria. Maria is a disabled woman working to complete her graduate program, who's also healing from brain surgery. When she reached out to my office, she wrote the following: SNAP is the only support I have right now to afford groceries. Without it, I don't know how I would eat. Even with the limited amount that I receive, I already have to ration my food carefully. I stretch every dollar, compare prices, and look for sales just to be able to get basic, healthy meals. Fresh produce and nutritious food are expensive and even harder to afford on a tight SNAP budget. A cut to my benefits would put me at an even greater disadvantage. I'm already doing everything I can to heal physically and stay on track academically. Please, Please don't make it harder. I'm working toward becoming a more productive and self-sufficient member of society, but right now, I need help. SNAP is not a luxury, it's a lifeline. This is what another constituent of mine had to say. Her name is Sarah from Los Angeles. She's a working single mom of 2 kids. Last year, she said, I lost my job. Like many working-class families, I lived paycheck to paycheck. I had no savings. Rent was due. My children still needed to eat. Unemployment benefits barely covered a portion of our household bills, and I had to go into credit card debt just to stay afloat. I didn't choose to be in that position. Life happened, unexpected and out of my control. Applying for SNAP was not easy. It was humbling, but it was also necessary. SNAP gave me something I hadn't had in months, peace of mind. With SNAP, I didn't have to choose between paying for groceries or paying for rent. I didn't have to put my kids to bed hungry while I tried to figure out how to get back on my feet. SNAP allowed me to focus on finding work and rebuilding my life without sacrificing my children's basic need for food. If it weren't for SNAP, I honestly don't know how we would have made it, and I am not alone. Sarah is most definitely not alone. This is the story of Ariel Hartman, a constituent of mine working in the entertainment industry. She reached out to our office to tell her story. Work has been incredibly hard to come by ever since the strike in 2023. The work has diminished and we are all scrambling. Most months I'm working myself to the bone and still have to charge things like gas and groceries all on credit. The fires in January were a horrible thing to go through. Shoots got canceled, schools closed because it was too dangerous. So I didn't have any income until mid-February. But it's more than just myself I'm worried about. I also take care of my 82-year-old mother. She had a horrible accident a year ago, causing a brain hemorrhage, a broken nose, and a broken leg. When she was here over Christmas, I was able to make us a lovely, albeit small, Christmas dinner because I was able to buy groceries with my SNAP benefits. It was one of the only gifts I could actually give since neither of us could really afford to buy presents. These may seem like small things to us, but it was the highlight of my holidays. I'm so grateful SNAP allowed me to give my mom a nice Christmas. These are the stories we need to keep telling. We can't lose sight of the fact that people's lives will be turned upside down if programs like SNAP are taken from them. I'm deeply grateful for my constituents sharing their stories with me so I could share them with you today. And Ms. Johnson, I want to thank you for being here and representing all of SNAP beneficiaries whose access to food is at stake under this bill. Once again, my thanks to our 2 chairs and to all of our witnesses. I see the leader has arrived. That's my cue to end.
Thank you so much, Senator Schiff, as well, for sharing those personal stories. Life happens, as Sarah wrote to you. Thank you for sharing that as well. I now want to recognize Democratic leader Chuck Schumer.
Not leaving, the mic isn't working. Okay. Well, first, let me thank Senator Luján for having this spotlight hearing. Senator Luján, you know, he speaks often about this issue and people in need, and you know the compassion and sincerity he has about it. And he's so persuasive, not only with our caucus and not only with the people of New Mexico, but with the people of the whole country. Because people know you're the real deal. So thank you. And I see you got a haircut for this hearing. Very nice. Okay. And I also want to welcome Barbara Gwynn. How are you, Barbara? Barbara's our commissioner in New York State, the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance. And she's done tremendous work in New York to help our low-income families get their benefits. In New York, we're very proud that we care for people who need help. You know, some parts of the country, they think that makes you a bad state. We think it makes us a good state. We think it makes us standing up for American ideals and for decency and for our whole religious traditions, whatever our religions are. They would all say the same thing. Don't take the food out of the mouths of hungry children, or hungry senior citizens, or hungry veterans, or hungry unemployed people. So many people are affected by SNAP. So thank you, Barbara, for doing that. And just to inform our audience, and I'm sure you've been told this before, but it's worth repeating, these witnesses should be heard by our Republican colleagues. But they are so narrow-minded, if you will, in only wanting to hear their point of view. And yet, the reason I think that's the case is because they know their point of view is not very popular with the American people. It so happens that SNAP is probably the most popular program that they have put on the chopping block. Over 80% of Americans support SNAP. And that's a majority not only of Democrats and independents, but of Republicans as well. So they don't want you to be heard by them. Now you will be, because Senator Lujan has had this hearing, and because this is, I guess, being live streamed, as most of our spotlight hearings are. So hello, America. Please listen in and tell your friends and neighbors to call their senators as well. The big, beautiful bill. How can you call a bill that's beautiful that would gut feeding hungry people by $300 billion, more than we have ever seen? It would be a 30% cut over the next 10 years. I have traveled across my state and gone to food banks and other groups that help feed the hungry. The response is overwhelming. And one of the most beautiful things, no matter where we have the event, we just had one on Staten Island Monday. I think it was Monday. No, it was Friday. You know who shows up? Lots of people who are affected, who are not affected, but who care about this. And it's amazing. It draws our religious community out. We've had more ministers and priests and rabbis and imams and temple leaders than I've ever seen. Lots who weren't invited, just heard about it and came, because it is part of our religious tradition. And they talked about, you know, in such sincere terms. One of the people I remember in Rochester, I've done this in just about, well, I have to say, in all of our, in many of our districts where the House members were reluctant to vote to keep SNAP. And in Rochester, there was a very wonderful man, a veteran, decorated, had a great job, had 3 kids, but had lost his job and couldn't feed the kids. And he was reluctant to show up at 350 Plus, which is our food bank in, our conglomeration of food banks in Rochester. And then when he showed and he saw that there were other people like him, and he had some veterans online with him, he saw that this was a need that was not just his, and it wasn't his fault. And of course, he was so overjoyed to feed his children. A couple of points I like to make in general, because some of the enemies of this program still go by the old lies. Oh, it's for booze. It's for chocolate bars. It's only good food that's allowed with SNAP. Meats, potatoes, vegetables, fruits, produce. And how about they say there's waste, fraud, and abuse? They don't point to any. It's an excuse, because they don't want to say they're not feeding the hungry, that they're against feeding the hungry. So I would like to ask our Republican friends, is it waste to feed a hungry child? Is it fraud to feed a disabled person who can't get to work? Is it abuse to feed a senior citizen? Who, by the way, our senior citizens, because of what they're doing on Medicaid and health care, are going to get big increases in their health care costs, and they're going to have less money for food. And then we don't want them to make the choice between desperately needed medicines and desperately needed food. So this waste, fraud, and abuse is a lot of bull. They have waste, fraud, and abuse. Let them point it out to us, and we'll work with them to get rid of it. But that's an excuse to just cut. And 11 million people, as we know, would be at risk of losing food. 5 million would see their benefits reduced. 4 million children go to bed hungry. That really just, when a child is hungry, he or she, they can't learn, they can't socialize very well. It changes their lives for the worse. And it's $5 a day. That's what the average cut would be. We'd get only $5 a day after the cut. Every dollar invested in SNAP returns $62 in long-term value, and yet they want to cut this, so it's only $5 a day. So please, everybody, Abe Lincoln said it best during the height of the Civil War, when he was beleaguered and he worried about the country, as everyone did. He said, public sentiment is everything. Public sentiment is everything. You know, that means each of us who wants to help that hungry child, that hungry veteran, that hungry senior citizen, should call our senators, email, write, picket, do whatever you want, but let them know, and call your friends to call them as well. It's a moral imperative. This is not a political issue. This is not a partisan issue. This is a moral issue, as our scriptures so well tell us. So thank you, witnesses. Thank you, Ben Ray. Thank you, my colleagues, Senator Klobuchar and Kane and Schiff and Merkley, for being here. And we're going to fight this fight because it is so important. We're going to use every tool in our toolbox to see that these cuts don't occur. Thank you.
Well said, Leader Schumer. I appreciate that. Senator Merkley, you're recognized. Thank you for being here, Chuck.
I so appreciate all my colleagues coming. I particularly appreciate you all bringing your expertise to bear, and Jade for bringing your story, which is the most powerful consideration is to always understand that the numbers that experts may talk about, that there are real people, real families, and real harm. I wanted to just start with a question to Katie, and we put it very simply. Will more children go hungry as a result of the reconciliation bill?
Senator, thank you for that question. I think the reality is any impact on SNAP that is going to pull benefits away from families is going to result in more hungry children. It's going to result in more hungry seniors. It's going to result in more hungry veterans. All of those groups that rely so heavily on SNAP to meet their needs, there is going to be an impact.
And are we talking about dozens or hundreds or thousands or millions of children being affected?
Across the entire country, millions.
Millions of children go hungry because of this bill. What happens when a child tries to study in school if they are hungry?
Food insecurity or hunger has a major effect on children in a variety of ways. It can mean something as simple, and simple is probably not the right word, but something as simple as just being able to pay attention in class. That is hampered. It can create all kinds of challenges with behavior that really limits a child's ability to learn. Interestingly enough, for children that aren't getting enough food, oftentimes they'll fall asleep in class. That's a pretty common thing. So a child is not able to come ready to learn if they aren't getting the food that they need.
So in the short term, hungry children means children who are unable to learn at the same rate that we would hope they could. Does that have long-term consequences for the children?
It does have very long-term consequences, particularly for younger children that are not getting the food that they need at those really critical stages in life. It can pull children behind by sometimes years in school and make it really difficult.
So part of that is behavioral issues that you mentioned, but also what about just in terms of nutrition being important to the develop of neural pathways in the brain? Is that an issue as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, when those important connections are being made, you have to have good nutrition in your life.
So this bill is really an assault on the short-term and the long-term success of millions of American children.
More children in hunger, experiencing hunger in our country is going to have an impact. There's no doubt.
Thank you. I think that's just so important to put it in the very stark terms. The reality of what this bill will mean. I wanted to turn next to Diane and the issue on rural communities. Is it the case that in general, more families are affected by cuts to SNAP in rural areas than in urban areas?
We know that more families rely on SNAP in rural communities. Whether these cuts would disproportionately impact them, I'm not actually sure because of the difference in age distribution, but we can say with great certainty that it will harm rural areas, especially not only directly for individuals who would be cut off of SNAP, but also through these work requirement waivers that they're trying to pull back. Oftentimes, rural areas, when they have economic downturns, it just takes them longer to recover, and this bill would cut people off of SNAP more quickly.
So if there's a member of Congress that represents a primarily rural district, and they're thinking that, oh, this will just affect poor urban centers, the answer is no, it has a very profound impact on your rural district as well?
Probably a larger impact on their rural districts.
Certainly the most rural district in Oregon is far more affected in terms of the number of SNAP participants than the most urban district in my state. And my last question, Barbara, is really about trying to understand the change in the requirement that states have to pay more to have this program. Will that result in the program being less available or less state funds for other education programs? Or are states going to be damaged by that requirement? And by states being damaged, I mean our family is going to be damaged.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the question. I think it's very important for everyone to understand that a cost shift does not eliminate the need. And when we're talking about something as important as SNAP, in alleviating hunger, that's a need that will continue. So a cost shift from the federal government to states and localities is actually either a tax cut or a benefit cut. So I think it remains to be seen, but the shifts are huge. For New York State alone, we're looking at $2.1 billion in cost shifts from the federal government to the state. And those are costs that states cannot afford to absorb and definitely will have an impact on residents throughout the state and impact other priorities, including education and other important programs.
Thank you so much. Please feel free to continue, but I will note my time's expired and I've got a lot of colleagues who'd like to ask questions.
Okay. We just put out a piece through the Brookings Institution today about how the state cost share will also harm this even more during recessions. Right now, they can't pay for it in good economic times. We'll someday face another recession, and this will really hamper one of our most important tools at combating recessions.
So the coming Trump slump will make this situation even worse.
Even if we avoid it now, and someday we'll have a recession again, and we need to have all of our tools available.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Merkley. Senator Klobuchar.
Sure. I just wanted to back up what Senator Merkley was saying, and the chart is right here for our colleagues to use. These are the red states, and it's exactly what Senator Merkley and our witnesses were saying. The red are in red. They're represented by Republican senators, and it shows the percentages that will be shifted over there. And the numbers, it's like 50 million for Kansas, 400 million for North Carolina. 41 of these states have balanced budget amendments. So they're going to either have to drastically cut these benefits when people can't afford groceries as groceries are up, or they're going to have to cut law enforcement, or they're going to have to cut health care. So this is just a complete sleight of hand from the Republican House, and now it's in the laps of the Republican senators, and they need to hear from their own governors, because the Democratic governors have been out there saying there is not the money, including places like Kansas.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. Senator Padilla, you're recognized.
Thank you so much, Senator Luján, and really appreciate your leadership and Senator Klobuchar's leadership in highlighting this critical and obviously timely challenge that we have. Now, we're here today because in order to make life easier for billionaires, apparently that's an agenda item, congressional Republicans are pushing a budget bill that would literally harm young children, would harm single mothers, would harm Americans with disabilities, would harm countless seniors, some of the most vulnerable members of our communities. And Republicans would have you believe that SNAP benefits are some sort of luxury, the way they talk about it. Nobody aspires to live on food stamps. What food stamps are is a lifeline for millions of Americans. And I want to make crystal clear to the American people that cutting $300 billion from SNAP would be devastating. It's outright cruelty, literally taking from the poor to give to the rich. No one in our country should go hungry because billionaires need another tax break. That's the Republican agenda. So today we're here to expose these devastating cuts, literally the largest in history, for what they really are. Tax breaks for billionaires paid for by the most vulnerable in our society. Now, one of the most concerning elements of the bill is how it targets immigrant communities. There's immigrants in every state in the nation. It targets them through deliberate exclusions of tax-paying non-citizens or their families from receiving child tax credit, Medicaid, and SNAP. And I'll remind those watching that Californians who are undocumented pay $8.5 billion a year in taxes, yet they are excluded from the public programs that their tax dollars are funding. But this bill would go even further and target immigrants with legal status. So we can and are having a debate about how many undocumented residents in the United States and how and why. But here we're talking about the impact on legal immigrants and the states that use their own state funds to provide additional non-federal benefits to non-citizens. Commissioner Gwynn, can you share how the bill would take food assistance away from lawfully present immigrants who have long been eligible for SNAP, and what the consequences would be for immigrant communities at large?
Absolutely, thank you. In New York, we also have a very vibrant immigrant community, and we welcome them. They make our community throughout the state stronger, throughout the state. The SNAP program first already has some pretty stringent limitations on the extent to which non-citizens can receive benefits. So the fact that this bill goes even farther in reducing access for individuals who are legally, lawfully present in our country is of great concern. In New York State, we estimate that as a result of the provisions in the House bill to further prevent legal non-citizens from accessing food benefits would impact about 70,000 individuals. So, these, as all of us have said, SNAP is typically temporary. It is often received by individuals who are trying really hard to work, putting a couple of jobs together. That's no different for these immigrants who are legally present in our country, and we believe that they should continue to receive SNAP benefits and actually would prefer to move in a different direction to expand access for additional legally present non-citizens. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And we focused a lot on the devastating impacts these cuts would have, not just on recipients, but Dr. Schanzenbach, you've talked about how SNAP doesn't just fight against hunger, it actually is a driver of local economies throughout the country, impacting farmers, food producers, grocery retailers, truck drivers, et cetera. Can you just expand on what those economic impacts would be?
Right. There's two types of the economic impacts when it comes to society. One is just during normal good times, and these benefits really help make sure that people have money to go to the grocery store, so the grocery store gets to hire plenty of checkout people, and the, transportation workers get to, work. And so there's a multiplier effect. There are lots of good studies on how large that is. We're certainly getting more than $1 in benefits for every dollar that we pay in SNAP. What's different, and I think underappreciated in this conversation so far, is how important SNAP is when there's an economic downturn. Because SNAP and because of the full federal funding of SNAP can very quickly expand in economic downturns, that means that people can still go to the grocery store, and it means that the grocery store doesn't have to lay off certain people, and it has often been the most effective stimulus money that we've spent. Like during the Great Recession, they topped up benefits by like 15%. The studies came back and found that they got something like $1.75 return for every dollar that you spent on those increased benefits. SNAP is a very effective tool. It's also particularly effective when there are natural disasters like the fires in California. We saw a little bit about the spillover effects on other people, right? Because we live in a society where, our economic well-being is interconnected. And if we pull the rug out from one sector, that's going to have ripple effects.
I appreciate you mentioning that it's not just economic downturns, but with the increasing frequency and scale of natural disasters, the role and impact of SNAP there as well. I know my time has run out. I just want to briefly associate myself with questions and concerns raised by Senator Merkley on disproportionate impact in rural areas of California and across the country. I thank you all for being here and helping dispel some of the untruths, to put it mildly, coming from the other side. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Padilla, thank you so much for being here. Senator Bennett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Senator Luján. Thank you so much for holding this hearing. And Senator Klobuchar, thank you for leading the way here as well. Thank you for the witnesses for being here. Ms. Johnson, I'm going to come to you, if that's okay, after I have a little bit of a wind-up here. SNAP helps 1 in 10 Coloradans put nutritious food on the table, supports more than 3,000 retailers in our state, from grocery stores to farmers markets. It reduces poverty, it strengthens rural economies, and generates $1.50 in local economic activity for every federal dollar that is spent. There are very few federal dollars that we can say that about. It's one of the most effective investments we can make to keep families fed and local economies afloat. But the bill the House Republicans sent to the Senate would make the largest cuts to SNAP in the nation's history and in the program's history. It doesn't just shrink the program, it shifts the burden onto states, as my colleagues have said. I don't think that's well understood, even by members of the Senate, much less the public. If passed, Colorado would be responsible for recovering 20% of SNAP benefits and 75% of administrative costs. That is around $300 million per year in new spending. Those are costs that Colorado can't absorb without cutting benefits, narrowing eligibility, or gutting services for our most vulnerable citizens. It's a shell game here, but it shows up in real lives in Colorado. And it doesn't stop there. The Republican bill layers on red tape, piles on new administrative hurdles, and then punishes states when these pressures lead to errors. And this isn't about rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. It's sabotage of this program. And Republicans just want to make it harder for families to address this lifeline, one they desperately need. And as I said, this isn't a cost-saving measure, it's a cost shift, and one that puts states into making impossible choices. We should be streamlining access. We should be modernizing systems. We should be slashing red tape, not setting up systems to collapse under the weight of unfunded mandates. And Ms. Johnson, first of all, thank you for coming to testify today. I know you have a young daughter. Is it a daughter? Yes. Before I was in this job, I used to be the superintendent of the Denver Public Schools, so I spent a lot of time with families in that context. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how these cuts might can hurt your ability to be able to take care of your daughter and to be able to make choices about where you are during the day and where she is during the day. I hope in school is where she is, but
Yes,
how
yes.
how you think about that struggle?
Well, besides my mother, I do rely on my daughter going to public school for childcare. That cut would necessarily not be beneficial to me at all because I already work 2 jobs and I go to school as well. I have to schedule with school, summer school. I have to schedule with my mom, who also has disability. She has kidney failure, so depending on her health, sometimes I have to call out of work and have to call out of school, and those are plenty of hours that I'm missing.
And do you, I'm sure you've already testified to this, I apologize, but could you just, if you don't mind, remind people what those 2 jobs are?
Yes, I'm a certified medical assistant. I work as a home health aide right now, and I work at Darnestown Presbyterian Church in their child care center.
And what would it mean to you if you had to, I don't know what you would do. I mean, how do you make a choice about whether to take on a 3rd job or not, be able to pay for childcare for your daughter? It just it seems impossible.
Yes, that's a very impossible choice. Also, that would interfere with the goals that I'm chasing right now, that I'm building towards going to school to become a dialysis technician. I'm lucky enough that I even have a little bit of time to go to school and study and work and be a mommy. So picking up another job, I would probably have to drop school. And I don't know if I'm gonna have the energy to do it at another time. I'm trying to do it while I'm young and I still got the energy to do it.
Well, I just want to thank you for adding to your concerns by coming here, because I know that couldn't have been an easy decision to make either.
No, but I don't mind speaking up, advocating for some beneficial things.
And that's what I just want to say as I close. Thank you on behalf of children and their parents all over Colorado for being here who couldn't be here today because they're working 2 or 3 jobs, because they have a daughter, because they're trying to get an education just to improve their lives and make a little bit more money, which is what you're trying to do, provide your child the American dream. That's what you're trying to do. The kids that I used to work for in the Denver Public Schools, their parents all were working 2 or 3 jobs to do whatever they could to move their kid along in this economy and in this society. So on their behalf, I just want to say thank you so much for being here.
You guys are very welcome.
Thank you, Senator Bennett. Senator Hirono, you're recognized for questions.
Sorry. Okay, now you can hear me. I can hear myself. Thank you all for being here and sharing your perspectives. This bill is called Big Beautiful Bill, and there's nothing beautiful about it. It is big in terms of the harm that is causing. And to contemplate $300 billion in SNAP funding, which is the largest cut in the history of the program, it is obscene that we're sitting here talking about these kinds of massive cuts to a program that is literally feeding children and our families at the same time as this bill is providing trillions of dollars in tax breaks to billionaires. It is obscene. In Hawaii, every single state is impacted by these kinds of cuts. And in Hawaii, 160,000 people, thousands of households, tens of thousands of households in Hawaii receive SNAP benefits. And we know that these benefits are so important for our children. And really, any bill that harms children to the extent that this bill does, and not just children, but our kupuna, or our seniors as we call them, our veterans who live in households that rely on SNAP, not to mention the farmers and the grocery stores who are also harmed. I characterize this as obscene, and that is because it is. In Hawaii, we have GusSNP, we call in Hawaii Dabucks, and it is a very popular program to provide fresh produce to our families, and we know how important it is for our families to understand how critical fresh food is, and so of course it helps our farmers. So across the board, all of these programs are going to be impacted. I did have a question about the resources of our food banks. I have visited many food banks in Hawaii and continue to provide support for them, and this is for Katie Anderson. So our food banks are seeing an increased reliance on food banks, and I think that's happening throughout the country. If our charitable food system is already stretched, how likely is it that even given time, food banks could fill the gap that these cuts would create?
Senator, thank you for that great question. What we're looking at would require something along the lines of doubling or tripling capacity, current capacity for food banks and food pantries, many of which are small churches in very rural communities. And it is challenging for for-profit organizations to double or triple capacity and turn that around very quickly. I don't see that happening in a quick fashion. So what will likely happen is an incredible increase in need and in hunger in communities, and a major challenge to try to meet that need.
So I know that during COVID, the reliance of food banks really increased, and there were long lines of people, many families who had never relied on food banks. They were waiting in cars to receive food, and now you have the situation where there are literally millions of people in our country are going to be in that situation. And one wonders, like, are the philanthropic organizations going to step up enough to also fill the gap that this kind of huge cuts will leave?
I can tell you there is a desire to do that, to step up and meet the need in every way we possibly can. But there's also the reality of needing to even get food into the food banks. There's been a recent cut in TFAP commodities. There's some talk about some other food programs that want to be cut, that they would like to cut. And the question then comes in, where is that food going to come from? You know, where are the trucks going to come from to take the food to the different communities?
I know that there are, I'm sorry, I don't know who the person is who can respond to this, but there's going to be a shift of state funds or local funds to make up some of the shortfall. And so we're talking about a massive shift. Is there anybody on the panel who can talk about what kind of priorities the states are going to have to face in order to lend some support to take up the gap that is being left by these massive cuts to SNAP?
So thank you, Senator. I'm actually the commissioner of the agency that oversees SNAP in New York. The cost shifts are significant, as you mentioned. For New York, it would be over $2.1 billion each year. Those are costs that state and localities cannot absorb. We must balance our budgets. As a result, something has to give, right? It would either be that the state's going to have to raise taxes or make cuts potentially in hunger alleviation programs or other priority programs, including educating our children. So the cost shifts are simply a shift. It is shifting the federal government's responsibility for this program to states and localities. And that shift will have significant negative impact for citizens throughout this country.
I think that is the information or the communication that American people need to get, that this budget reflects the priorities of the Republicans, and those priorities are to give massive tax cuts to billionaires who certainly don't need it, and literally taking food out of the mouths of our children and doing so. Thank you very much.
Senator Hirono, thank you so much for being with us today. Senator Warnock, you're recognized.
Thank you, Senator Luján, for pulling us together in this way. It's such an important topic. I appreciate you convening this forum. We need to talk about so-called big, beautiful bill. I call it the big, ugly bill. And it is clear that this is a thinly veiled attempt at robbing the poor in order to pay for tax cuts for the rich. We've talked a lot about these cuts. The question is, who's this for? Who is all of this paying for? It's for the billionaires. It's for a percentage of the 1%. And one of the alarming ways that my Republican colleagues are trying to hide over $290 billion in cuts to food assistance for the hungry is by shifting up to 25% of the cost to the states, as we've been discussing. This is one big unfunded mandate. In fact, I recently released this white paper that analyzes how the big ugly bill provision would cost Georgia almost $900 million. 900 million shifted to our state alone. And while that unfunded mandate should be concerning for all state officials, the Independent Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, estimates that provision alone would cut or eliminate nutrition benefits for 1.3 million hungry Americans. When you add up all the red tape and benefit cuts Republicans are trying to pass off, calling it waste, fraud, and abuse, at least 4 million hungry Americans would lose some, if not all, of their benefits. 4 million. I'm reminded of the scripture where Jesus said, I was hungry and you didn't feed me. When were you hungry? Inasmuch as you've done it to the least of these, you've done it also unto me. Ms. Gwynn, you serve as a state official in New York. Can you talk about how entire households are affected when one family member's SNAP benefits are cut? What's the impact of that?
Absolutely. So some of the provisions in this bill would eliminate the entire household's benefit, and others it would partially eliminate a household's benefit by reducing or eliminating a payment to the adult in a household with children. There is no question that the reduction of resources to that household will have a negative impact for that child. So children, as we've discussed earlier, children need to have adequate nutrition in order to develop their brains, to be able to learn in school, and also just reductions in financial resources to households, especially households living around the poverty line, have significant impacts on the stressors in that household that have additional negative impacts for all members of the household.
So they are literally talking about driving children into hunger in order to give billionaires a tax cut. And we should talk about this, who we're talking about. We're talking about children. In Georgia, as a white paper that I recently released shows, 1.4 million Georgians from nearly 694,000 households rely on SNAP, but 69% of those are participants with children in these families. And hunger is trauma on a child's brain.
Yes.
We want children to go to school. We want them to learn. We want them to grow. We need them. We don't know what part of our society they're going to contribute to. There is data that shows that math scores go up. Imagine that, if the child is not hungry. But not only will children be hungrier at home, almost 500,000 children will also lose access to school lunch and breakfast as a result of this terrible bill. As it turns out, 1 in 5 children in America is already food insecure. And so the big ugly bill will increase child hunger. I think that that is a moral outrage in our country. And it's for the noble cause of giving billionaires a tax cut. It's unconscionable that in the richest country in the world, congressional Republicans and President Trump are literally attempting to take food out of the mouths of children so that people like Elon Musk can get a tax cut. The prophet Amos says that they sell out the poor for silver and the needy for the cost of a pair of sandals. They're literally selling poor children out in order to give a tax cut to the rich, while at the same time adding $2.4 trillion to the national debt, a lot more over the next 30 years, some $37 trillion. So you take food out of the mouths of children, you impacting their ability to grow and to develop, and then you leave them the bill for this increasing debt. Where are all the Republicans who used to care about the national debt? Where are they in this moment? Thank you so very much for your testimony.
Senator Warnock, thank you so very much. Senator Fetterman, you're recognized for questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you for organizing this. So, you're all professionals, or you've had this experiences. Do Republicans ever get hungry? I mean, I've seen some research, they indicate that they do, but what's your thought? Can confirm?
Yes, hunger is not limited based on one's party affiliation.
And they also lose their jobs. They have bad luck, and they need to rely on the safety net.
So are Republicans banned from participating in SNAP? So, okay, so it impacts them. Now, I've seen statistics where that 16% of rural households participate in SNAP, and 13% of urban households participate on that. So typically, at least in my state, and if you're not, I'm Pennsylvania, and we have 67 counties, and the vast majority of them are red counties, and they're very Republican. And I do know that many people in those counties will get hungry, and they're often Republicans as well too. So I'd like to just point out that SNAP is not a Democrat thing. It's not just all the kind of the dog whistling for some of the other things that are about that. It's just that people get hungry, and we have a special responsibility in our nation to match that need on that. And now, personally, I'm sorry, but I think it's a shitty way to deliver tax cuts to the hyper wealthy. To do that in a way by, it's like, hey, people get hungry, and I know that's an effect, and hunger is a bipartisan issue in my view. Now, why are this is an open question. Why are you here today? Why are we all here today? What's your opinion of what's really happening here right now in Washington, D.C.? Explain this to people in the country. Why are we here talking about that? It's an open question.
I think each of us is here because we truly believe in the importance of making sure that those who are hungry can access food. And we strongly support
Hungry getting food, yeah.
the SNAP program.
That blows my mind.
Which is, right, SNAP is efficient and it is effective at delivering that food when people need it.
I would also like to help you stop some of the worst aspects of this bill. And one of those is the fact that because SNAP expands during economic downturns, it catches so many people right now, but it's going to catch more when the economy gets worse. And someday, again, it will get worse. And we need to be prepared for that.
Anyone other thoughts about exactly why you're here? You are very passionate about this, obviously.
Well, I can tell you that I'm here, working with a food bank for over a decade, and also 500 incredible partners across the state of New Mexico, that people end up in challenging times for a variety of reasons. And it's incredible to have a program that's effective, that's efficient, and one that can really meet the need for people where they are, and also creates that wonderful economic input for their community as well, right? I know we've talked about it before, but for every dollar spent, it's $1.50 that the community realizes. So that means jobs, that means keeping grocery stores open, particularly in very rural areas, especially smaller independent grocers. If that money goes away, what happens to those grocery stores, to the people who work there, to those communities? It creates a really potentially painful domino, falling of dominoes that is just hitting so many different people. And the important thing about that too is whether you need SNAP or not in a small rural community, you probably need the grocery store. So if that grocery store shuts down because it doesn't have enough money coming in, that impacts everybody, whether they're on SNAP or not.
Chairman, a minute, please. Okay. Would you like to?
Hey, I'm just here to advocate for having SNAP. I mean, how it benefits me, how it's a lifeline for me and my daughter. It helps me so I don't have to be overworked, so I'm able to continue to work towards my goal. It helps me so I don't have to steal. It helps me so so that I'm able to continue to work as hard as I have to get to where I'm trying to get.
Many of you came from significant distance to come here because you care about this. I'm not aware, are you aware of any members of our caucus that are voting to cut SNAP?
Senator Fetterman, there are no Democratic members of the United States Senate nor the United States House that are voting to reduce any SNAP benefit.
Exactly, yeah. So our caucus are fighting for hungry Republicans as well too, like in my state and in your states and in her state as well too. So we're not here fighting for our voters or our constituents. We're fighting for people, any of them that are hungry on that. And that's the thing. I don't really think, I know a lot of things are going to be politicized, but I don't think hunger isn't it's not the best of us to do these kinds of a thing, for that. And I wish we weren't in this conversation. When we were in the majority, we had a lot more leverage to push back against a lot of these things. But I know, thank you for coming, of such a distance to really advocate for a lot of this, because I know how important that it is. And now we're all really, so thank you. And thank you, my colleague and friend from New Mexico, for organizing this as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Fetterman. Thank you, my friend, for being here. Senator Klobuchar, you're recognized.
Very good. Well, follow up on Senator Fetterman's really excellent questions about that cost shift. And he noted, Pennsylvania, $1 billion shifted over to their state. Look at the other numbers. West Virginia, $141 million shifted over. Kentucky, $172 million shifted over. Texas, over $1 billion they would have to absorb under this big, beautiful betrayal. North Carolina, I mentioned early, $584 million. Missouri, $376 million shifted over. Arkansas, small state, $109 million shifted over. And as I mentioned, 41 of these states have balanced budget amendments. They're not going to be able to absorb it. Could you, Ms. Gwynn, talk about how there is absolutely no way, despite the sleight of hand and the claims that are truly lies when they say this doesn't involve cuts, why this sleight of hand in these enormous amounts while grocery prices are up and going up, why that in fact involves cost shifts that involve cuts. There is no way this doesn't involve cuts.
Thank you. Absolutely be happy to do that. As I mentioned earlier, the cost shifts currently would result in over $2.1 billion every year for New York State and potentially our local governments. These are costs that we cannot absorb without taking negative action. As I mentioned earlier, hunger will continue. It's not going to go away simply because certain members of Congress have decided to shift the responsibility for the SNAP program to the states. Hunger will continue. Our hope is that we would be able to find a way to continue SNAP, but honestly, that can only happen if other factors take place. It's not magic, so it's either we increase taxes, which we don't want to do. We've worked hard to keep taxes down and recently to reduce taxes for the lowest income and working families. Or we would have to make cuts in other priority areas, including education, environmental impact, other really important things for our state and for our governor.
Very good. And Ms. Anderson, my last question here. There's many people who suggest that we shouldn't worry about SNAP because the charitable and nonprofit community are going to step in and pick up the slack. Can they do that? And what is your capacity to do that right now?
Thank you, Senator, for that great question. There is a desire, I would say, by the Charitable Food Network to do whatever we possibly can to meet the need of the moment. But the reality is that we're talking about the need to double or even triple current outputs. In New Mexico this past year, we were able to get 39.1 million meals out into the state. And the cost shift would look somewhere in the neighborhood of 95 million meals in a deficit. So we would be looking at, in order to just keep things steady, 95 million meals plus 39.1 million meals, and needing to be able to get to that point. And quite honestly, the food just isn't there. Food costs money. We do get donations in, which make a wonderful difference, but we're not going to suddenly get 95 million meals worth of food in. We have to truck that food. We have to have partners that can take that food on and store it safely. It would be an impossible thing.
Thank you. And I want to thank all the witnesses and certainly thank Senator Luján and his staff for their work on this, as well as my ag staff that helped out a little bit. You did a great job. We had huge attendance of senators, and it just shows you can see the different parts of the country, from Georgia to Pennsylvania to Minnesota to New Mexico represented here, and you can see the arguments that I think are really clear-cut about why are you going to reduce taxes for multi-millionaires and billionaires, and even more than what they already have, which we could actually change that. We could say we're not going to add any taxes for people making under, whatever you want to say, $400 million a year. But we are going to make some changes at the top because that could help pay for things like housing and childcare and the deficit. Instead, they went the opposite. They doubled down on more tax cuts for billionaires, paid for on the backs of people, seniors, kids, veterans, who are simply trying to get food. So that's very clear. And then you've got this crazy cost shift sleight of hand, which we have to get the governors in these red states, some of whom are Democrats, some of whom are Republicans, some of whom have stepped up and talked about this, and we need them to come out and say what this really is about. And then I think the grocery argument that was made and what this means to grocery stores, who've also been standing up, little grocery stores in small towns that barely exist on the margins anyway, and we need them there. So it's an entire ecosystem that has distinguished our country because we're able to grow our food, and the farmers are affected by this big time. We are able to sell our food at grocery stores and have a distribution network across our country, including food banks for those who need help here and there. And we're able to support our people in this country. And this big, beautiful betrayal goes the opposite way.
Senator Klobuchar, thank you. Ms. Johnson, I understand that, as we all know, with life's busy responsibilities, it's time for you to go pick up your daughter, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, it is. So I just want to thank you for being here. And one question I do have of you, so just remind everyone, you're a working mom, working single parent, 2 jobs. You're here advocating for others, raising your voice.
Yes.
It's time for you to go pick up your daughter as well.
Yes.
But I heard you say that you're going to school to be a dialysis technician.
Yes, sir.
Am I guessing that all that the family's gone through and especially mom, did that have an impact on you studying to become a dialysis technician?
Yes.
I'm just guessing. I just want to thank you. You're taking care of kids as one of your jobs.
Yes.
You're a home health care worker, taking care of other families on your job. You're taking care of your daughter. You're working with mom. You're all taking care of each other.
Yes.
You're an example of what's good.
Yes.
And I just want to say thank you for being here, raising your voice. I want to, you're excused as a witness. Be safe driving. I'm sorry about the cold room in here, but thank you for your testimony and being present today.
You guys are so very welcome. I enjoyed myself.
Thank you. Well, we'll talk again. Thank you so very much. To the family, thank you. God bless you. Be safe, and we'll talk soon. Thanks for using your voices today. A couple questions I have as we close today, and I thank everyone for being here. Dr. Schazenbach, there's been a lot of conversations about grocery stores, especially in rural America. Senator Klobuchar was just clear that it might surprise a lot of folks, but those little grocery stores in the smallest parts of the country, they're barely making it, if they're making it at all. Now, it's my understanding that, is it true that it's about 10% of the retail transactions? 10%. That's $1 in $10.
That's right, and it can be
That comes
more
from SNAP?
concentrated.
From
in
nutrition
some places.
programs? Yeah.
That's right, that's right. This is a large amount of money, and it's concentrated in some areas. So some of those small businesses might
Yeah.
have 20, 30, something like that, % of their revenues come from SNAP.
So if those programs get hit where these folks are floating on the margins by like 1 or 2%, what happens to them? Is there a danger of them closing?
Right, there's danger that they're gonna lay off people and then ultimately close. SNAP helps communities, it doesn't just help individuals, and cutting SNAP will also harm communities.
So if I understand this correctly, when my Republican colleagues are going after the Medicaid funds, that's going after health care, and then they put a trigger in here that's going to go after Medicare over 10 years. Like, that's another $500 billion that no one wants to talk about. So rural health care clinics, most of them are open because of Medicaid beneficiaries that are going. That's also revenue to little hospitals. So those could close. And now we're hearing that these little grocery stores in these same small towns might get closed as well. I mean, that's happening across the country. And it's all how my colleagues in the Senate and in the House that voted for this monstrosity, they're saying, no, it's up to states. States are going to determine if grocery stores close or rural hospitals close. It's passing the buck.
And so many of the dollar amounts that we've talked about today are during good times, right? Don't forget that this will have, someday we will have a recession or we'll have a wildfire or something, and the states won't be able to step up extra.
Well, we just had one of the worst wildfires in our state's history. I think it's the worst. We just came off of hurricane season where it devastated friends. I mean, there's still people out in North Carolina that don't have a place to call home. There's folks in California that haven't been able to rebuild because the insurance companies are being bad players there. It's bad, it's tough. And you're saying that it could get worse if the economy takes a turn. That then all these other programs that go into place that are generally there to help all of our neighbors and friends or maybe ourselves, those are all in question.
And it's sort of a 1-2 punch. One is from the cost share for states. Oh, and by the way, if you get a bunch of people applying for SNAP and then you just make more mistakes, they'll ramp up the match rate. So states will be in real trouble. But then also, this bill makes it harder to waive work requirements when the economy is slack. And so people who are normally subject to work requirements in those areas won't be given a break from them. So we're really going to hit them twice.
So, Commissioner, the conversation I just had was around what happens if these programs go away. So nutrition dollars go up, working families like Ms. Johnson, they all of a sudden are left without. My Republican colleagues in the Senate and the House say, oh, don't worry, states can pick it up. You run the program. You have a responsibility for tens of millions of people in one state. Is your state just able to say, oh, don't worry, we got this all covered, everything's going to be fine, and then extrapolate that to all the states across America? How would you respond to that?
As Governor Hochul has said, New York State cannot absorb the level of federal cost shifts that are being put before us. Obviously, we would do everything we can to continue to focus our policy priorities on helping low-income households, certainly on helping individuals eat, but to pretend that a cost shift isn't a cut in services is absolutely disingenuous. And we agree it is absolutely walking away from the federal responsibility for what has been a very robust, efficient, and effective program that has otherwise really had bipartisan support and helps individuals all throughout this country.
Yeah. And look, one of the big lies that's part of all of this is my Republican colleagues have said that this is about cutting programs, about fiscal responsibility. Well, the dirty secret is they're adding to the debt. They're adding to the deficits. I think it was Senator Warnock that said they're taking food, in this case, out of the mouths of kids, and then they're going to pass them the tab because they're making this go up and up and up. There's no fiscal responsibility with this. It's just getting worse and worse. Now, Ms. Anderson, you've committed your life to making sure food banks are able to provide support to families when times get tough, when there's a wildfire, a natural disaster, or as Sarah, Senator Schiff's constituent said, life happens. What happens to the food banks across the country when there's more pressure on these little rural grocery stores and they get closed? My Republican colleagues in the Senate and House say, don't worry, the states will pick up the tab, and they can't. That's another lie. What happens to food banks? And tell me what you've been seeing with the economic times that we're in right now with lines over at the food banks in New Mexico.
Thank you, Senator. Lines are increasing. That's the reality for New Mexico, and that's the reality across the country. We're hearing from other food banks as well. So what that means is all of us trying to do more with less, and we can't meet the need if the amount of cuts that are being proposed happen. It's just not going to be a possibility in New Mexico, and it's not going to be a possibility anywhere in our country.
You know, I was blessed to have a mom and dad. We lived with our grandma and grandpa. We all lived together, Grandpa Celedon and Grandma Nestora. And my grandfather taught me a few lessons growing up when we work on that little farm that I still call home today. He'd always say, leave things better than you found them. That's an important golden rule that should guide us all. But the other thing, when I would get in trouble as a kid, and I wasn't completely honest with mom or dad, grandma and grandpa, mom and dad would both tell me the cover-up is worse than the lie. And when my colleagues, my Republican colleagues in the Senate and the House sit across from me in a dais and they say, oh no, I'm not going to touch Medicaid. I'm not taking that program away from people across the country. Or the president says, oh, keep your hands off the nutrition programs. And over here, when the president speaks, all my Republican colleagues jump. They're looking to respond. But they went after this program even more than they originally said they would. The cover-up is worse than the lie. And the American people have been lied to about this. And the votes are there. The proof is in the pudding. It's one concern after another. I can't thank you all for being here. Senator Fetterman said it best. This is not about Democratic voters or constituents in blue states. This is people all across the country. Everybody and everyone out there, if you benefit from this program. If your kids benefit from this program. If the schools that your kids go to benefit from this program, not just for your kids or your grandkids, nieces and nephews, but for their classmates. You all may be taking care of a loved one that's a parent or a grandparent. Once we get to 65, they call us seniors. Seniors in America that need help. We all know them. And what about the incredible American people who served our country? Veterans. The commitments to them and the promises that were made, and the taking of these programs and the hurting of folks. This is about right or wrong. That's what this comes down to. It's hard to believe this is happening. And that my colleagues that are voting for this mess are able to say it with a straight face. The cover-up is worse than the lie. I cannot thank you for being here, for taking time from your days to share your personal stories, what you've committed your careers to, speaking to the challenges, the pain that our brothers and sisters, our friends and neighbors, the folks we go to church with or to a faith gathering, a ball game, that they're going to go through. Thank you for having the courage to speak up and put facts on the paper. The American people deserve the truth, and you've provided that today. To all the staff that helped make today possible and successful, I want to say thank you so very much. To my team in the office, several that are here today, Madeline, Robert, Rebecca, Adan, Seach, I see you back there. I think Luke's behind me, and Katie. Thank you for what you've done day in and day out. And for all of my colleagues who took time out of their day to come and to listen and to ask questions and share perspective, I want to say thank you. For all my Republican colleagues, not a one that was here today, we live stream this. You can catch it if you want to actually get some testimony and understand the real impact to your constituents and my constituents. I hope that you're willing to do that today. Now that concludes our forum today. Thank you again to all of our witnesses for providing their important perspectives, and to all my colleagues for joining us. Thank you very much.